The notification came through at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, right as my daughter was sliding a fresh tray of snickerdoodles out of the oven. She was 11 years old, careful and focused, using the oven mitts I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, the ones with little foxes on them that she refused to replace even though they were starting to fray at the seams. She set the tray on the cooling rack, pulled off her mitts, and started counting the cookies the way she always did, making sure every order was exact before she boxed them up. My brother's message sat on my phone screen like something cold dropped into warm water. Lily, I need to be honest with you. The cruise is specifically for the older kids this time. Sophie just doesn't fit the dynamic we're planning. You know how it is, the teens have their own thing going and dragging along a younger one changes the whole vibe. We've been coordinating this for almost 4 months. It wouldn't be fair to everyone else. I read it twice. Then a third time. Mom, orders are ready. My daughter's voice came from the kitchen, bright and completely unaware. Mrs. Patterson's dozen and the Hendersons 2 boxes. Should I write the total on the receipt or just the individual prices? Just the total, sweetie. I'll be right in. I set my phone face down on the counter. Sophie had started her little baking business 8 months earlier, the same week school let out for summer. She'd come to me with a notebook, with handwritten columns for ingredients, costs and projected profit, and asked if she could use the kitchen on weekend mornings to fill orders. She'd already surveyed 6 neighbors about whether they'd pay for homemade cookies, and 3 of them had said yes before she even came to me. Her startup capital was $42 saved from birthday money and a loose tooth fund she'd maintained since she was 7. I'd said yes, obviously. How do you say no to a spreadsheet at age 10? By the time my brother sent that text, Sophie had a rotating customer list of 11 households, a standard price sheet she'd revised twice based on ingredient costs, and a mason jar on her dresser with over $300 in it. She didn't spend any of it. She said she was saving for something big, but she hadn't decided what yet. My brother didn't know about the jar. He didn't know about the business, really. He knew Sophie baked sometimes. He thought it was cute, the way you think a kid's lemonade stand is cute before you walk past it. The family cruise had been his wife's idea, originally a Disney cruise out of Port Canaveral, 5 nights, all the cousins together. My brother had 3 kids, 15, 13, and 12. My sister-in-law had 2 from her first marriage, both teenagers. Sophie, at 11, was the youngest by almost a year. I'd heard about the trip for months through my mother, who mentioned it casually the way she mentioned everything. Like it was already decided and I should simply know the details through osmosis. I'd assumed Sophie and I were included. We were family. These things didn't require explicit invitations, or so I thought. I picked up my phone and read my brother's text one more time. The thing my brother didn't know, the thing most of my family didn't know, was that I wasn't the version of Lily they'd constructed in their heads. My ex-husband and I had divorced 3 years earlier, and yes, I was a single mother, and yes, I worked as a freelance event coordinator, which my brother had described to his friends as she does parties with a particular tone that communicated exactly what he thought of it. What he didn't know was that one of those parties, 2 years ago, had turned into a long-term contract with a regional hotel chain. And that contract had led to 2 others. And that 18 months ago, I'd quietly sold a partial stake in the small coordination company I'd built to a hospitality investment group for enough money that I no longer needed to worry about money in any immediate sense. I lived in the same house I'd been in before the divorce. I drove the same car. Sophie still did her baking business because I believed in what it was teaching her. We weren't performing modesty. These were just our values. We didn't need more than we had, and I wasn't interested in explaining myself to people who'd already made up their minds about who I was. I opened my browser. Disney Wish. Concierge level. The words appeared on the screen with the particular clarity of a decision that's already been made. I looked at the dates my brother had mentioned to my mother, the 3rd week of September. I looked at cabin availability. I looked at what concierge level actually meant. A private lounge above deck 14, a dedicated concierge team, priority boarding, reserved seating for all shows, private character meet and greets, a personal host for the duration of the voyage. I looked at the price. I entered my card information. I requested the cabin with the split-level layout and the veranda facing starboard. Then I responded to my brother's text. Totally understand. Sophie and I will make our own plans. Hope everyone has a wonderful time. He responded in under 3 minutes. Thanks for being cool about it, Lil. You always get it. I set my phone down and went to help Sophie box up the Henderson order. The week before the cruise, my brother's family was loud about their excitement in the way that people are loud when they want to be seen being excited. His wife posted countdown graphics. His oldest son made a TikTok about packing. My mother sent me photos from their family group chat with captions like "so fun" and little sailboat emojis, which I think she meant as enthusiasm but which landed differently given the context. Sophie noticed. She wasn't the kind of kid who complained, but she was observant in the way that quiet children often are. She took things in, turned them over, and came to her own conclusions without making a production of it. She watched the posts while sitting next to me on the couch one evening and then she said, simply, "Are we not going?" "No, honey. Uncle decided it was just for the older kids this time." She was quiet for a moment. "Because I'm not old enough?" I thought about how to answer that. Something like that. "But we're going somewhere too." "Different trip, same week." She looked at me with the particular expression she got when she was processing information she wasn't sure was fully true. "Really? Would I lie to you about a vacation?" She smiled a little. "No. Can we afford it?" That question. I looked at my daughter, this child who tracked every ingredient cost, who recounted her mason jar savings monthly, who'd asked me once whether she should charge more for the gluten-free orders because almond flour was expensive. "You have saved over $300 baking cookies," I said. "Do you think I can manage?" She laughed. "Okay. Fair." I told her to put a pause on her baking orders for the week of the trip. She'd emailed every customer herself. She maintained an actual customer list in a Google Sheet, which her third-grade teacher would probably consider alarming to let them know about the temporary closure. 2 customers had responded to say they'd wait. One had asked if she could pre-order for when Sophie returned. We flew out the morning before my brother's family was driving to the port. Sophie had never flown first class before, and she spent the first 20 minutes after takeoff pressing every button on the seat controls with the methodical thoroughness of someone conducting an inspection. Then she settled in with her book and a cranberry juice and became the most composed passenger in the row. The Disney wish was bigger than she'd expected. I watched her face when we came through the atrium, the grand staircase, the chandelier shaped like a star, the way the light came down through the center of the ship, and she stopped walking completely for about 4 seconds, just standing there in the middle of foot traffic taking it in. "Mom," she said. "I know. How?" "Concierge level," I said. "Come on. Our host is meeting us upstairs." Our personal host was a woman named Dominique, who had the particular combination of warmth and efficiency that the best hospitality professionals develop over years. She walked us to the concierge lounge on deck 14, showed us the private sun deck, went through our itinerary for the 5 days, and asked Sophie directly what she was most excited about. Sophie said, without hesitation, "The kitchen tour, if there is one. I want to see how they manage food production at this scale." Dominique blinked. Then she smiled with what appeared to be genuine delight. "We do have behind-the-scenes culinary tours for concierge guests. I'll book you both for Thursday morning. The executive pastry chef leads it personally." Sophie turned to me. "There is a chef," she said. "There is a chef." Our cabin was on deck 12, with a veranda that looked out over open water. Sophie walked out onto it the first morning and stood there with her orange juice while the ship moved through flat blue ocean, and she had an expression I recognized, the same one she got when a batch came out exactly right, when every cookie was even and golden and exactly what she'd intended. We spent the first day exploring. Dominique had arranged priority access to the aquacoaster, and Sophie rode it twice before she decided she'd had enough of the water slides and wanted to go look at the ship's operational systems map she'd found in the welcome packet. This was my daughter. The second day, we had our private character breakfast before the dining room opened to general guests. Sophie took exactly 1 photo with Mickey and then spent the rest of the time asking Goofy's handler questions about the costume ventilation system, which the handler answered with admirable patience. I hadn't planned anything around my brother's family. I knew they were on the same ship. I'd figured that out from the dates and the port, and it was a large vessel, so I assumed we might simply not cross paths. I hadn't mentioned to my brother that I'd booked the same cruise. There was no malice in that. I simply had no obligation to coordinate my vacation plans with someone who had excluded my daughter from his. We crossed paths on the 3rd afternoon. Sophie and I were coming back from the adult pool area. I'd brought a book, she'd brought her notebook and spent an hour designing a new cookie box layout, which was simply the kind of thing Sophie did on vacation when I heard my brother's wife's voice carrying across the pool deck. I didn't see them at first. Then I did. My brother's family was spread across 2 tables near the main family pool. His teenagers were on their phones. His wife was sunburned and talking too loudly. My brother was at the bar looking at the menu with the expression of a man who has discovered that a drink costs $14 and is deciding whether to be angry about it. Sophie saw them at the same moment I did. She touched my arm. She didn't ask if we should go over. She just looked at me. "Let's give them their space," I said. "We're heading to the lounge." We turned toward the elevator that went to deck 14. We didn't see them again until the 4th evening. Thursday had been the culinary tour. The executive pastry chef, a man named Raymond, originally from Lyon, who had been with the company for 11 years, had taken Sophie and me through the working pastry kitchen while the ship was at sea. Sophie had asked, within the first 10 minutes, about the lamination process for the croissants, and Raymond had stopped walking and looked at her with the expression of a man who has encountered something he didn't expect. "How old are you?" he asked. 11, Sophie said. He looked at me. "She bakes? She runs a small cookie business." 11 regular customers. Raymond nodded slowly. He spent the rest of the tour addressing Sophie directly. By the end of it, he'd given her a signed copy of the ship's internal recipe booklet, not a guest gift, an actual working document, and told her that if she was serious about pastry, she should start learning about fermentation, because understanding how ingredients behave at a biological level was what separated good bakers from exceptional ones. Sophie held that booklet for the rest of the day like it was something fragile. The 4th evening, we had reservations at Palo Steakhouse, which required a separate booking and was not available to general guests without a significant wait. We were seated immediately when we arrived. Our table had a window seat overlooking the water, and Sophie had worn the blue dress she'd picked out herself, and she sat across from me reading the menu with a focused expression like she was evaluating the cost per ingredient ratios in her head. That was when my brother's family walked in. I heard them before I saw them. My sister-in-law's voice, then my brother saying something about a table. I glanced toward the host's stand. They were in a group, all 7 of them, and the host was explaining something. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. There was a wait. My sister-in-law was gesturing. My brother was looking at his phone. Sophie, who was facing the window, hadn't noticed them yet. Then my brother scanned the dining room the way people do when they're waiting for a table, looking for open space, and he saw me. I watched his face. It's a specific sequence of expressions: confusion, recognition, then a recalibration as the context doesn't match the expectation he'd built. We were at a window table. We had menus already. We were clearly not waiting. He said something to my sister-in-law. She looked. Her eyes went from my face to the table to Sophie to the general environment, and I could see the mental accounting beginning. Sophie turned around to check what I was looking at. "Oh," she said. "Uncle is here." "He is." She waved. He waved back from across the restaurant, a little stiffly. The host was still explaining something to my sister-in-law. I watched her shake her head. My brother put his hand on her back and said something. They stood there for another minute, and then they were guided toward a table, not a window table, not close to the front, but back toward the center of the room near the kitchen pass. I turned back to Sophie. Their server came to take our order. My brother made his way over to our table when their group was seated. He walked with the particular gait of someone who is trying to appear more casual than they feel. "Hey." He looked at the table, the window, the general surroundings. "How did you end up on this cruise?" "Sophie and I made our own plans," I said. "This is a big ship." He looked at our table setting, the window seat, the way a server had just refilled my water without being asked. "You're in concierge?" "We are." He processed this. "I've been hearing about the concierge lounge from the kids. They've been asking why we can't get up there. We've enjoyed it." He looked at Sophie. "Soph, Raymond from the kitchen gave you something?" Sophie held up the recipe booklet that she'd brought to dinner, for reasons entirely her own. "He said I should keep it for reference." My brother looked at me. "I mean, Lil, I didn't know." "I know you didn't. If I'd known you were coming on the same trip, you would have planned differently?" "Maybe," I said. "But here we are." We're having a wonderful time. I genuinely hope your family is too. There was a pause. He rubbed the back of his neck. Sophie's doing well. She always does. He started to say something else. I waited. The text I sent, the thing about the dynamic and Sophie not fitting in. I didn't mean it the way it came out. You meant exactly what you said, I told him, keeping my voice level, because Sophie was right there and I wasn't going to make this moment ugly in front of her. You assumed that because we live the way we live, because Sophie does her baking and I work the way I work, that we couldn't keep up. You made a decision for us without asking. I'm not angry about it. But you should understand that we don't need you to manage what we can or can't access. He was quiet. Sophie looked up from her menu. Uncle, do you want to see my box design? I've been working on a new layout for holiday orders. My brother looked at my daughter, this 11-year-old who had brought a notebook to a steakhouse on a Disney cruise and was genuinely, sincerely interested in sharing her work with him, and something in his face shifted. Yeah, Soph, he said. I'd like to see it. She slid the notebook across the table and started explaining the spacing decisions. He went back to his family's table after a few minutes. I watched him sit down and say something to his wife. She glanced over at us once, then looked at her menu. Our food arrived. Sophie cut into her salmon with the focused precision she applied to everything and announced that the pan sauce had notes of something she couldn't identify, maybe tarragon, and she wanted to ask the server about it. I flagged down the server. He confirmed it was tarragon. Sophie wrote it in her notebook. The last morning, Dominique came to our cabin to say goodbye and to give Sophie a gift from Raymond. A small signed card with a note about the fermentation book he'd recommended, and a set of pastry tools that he apparently kept a supply of for guests he found memorable. Sophie held the package and read the note twice, and I watched her face do the thing it did when something landed as genuinely important. She looked up at me. He gave this to me because of the questions I asked, didn't he? It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. Not because we're in concierge. No. Not because of that. She nodded, satisfied, and carefully put the package in her carry-on. On the bus back to the airport, she leaned against my shoulder and looked out the window at the Florida landscape going past. I could see her thinking. Mom. Yes. Why do we live the way we live? She wasn't asking in a troubled way. Just curious. Like she was checking her math. I took a breath. We live the way we live because I want you to understand what things actually cost. Not just money, time, effort. The work that goes into things. Your baking business, you know exactly what a bag of flour costs and how many batches it makes and what you need to charge to cover it. Most people your age have no idea about any of that. Most adults don't either. She was quiet for a moment. Uncle thinks we're not the same as them. That we can't do what they do. Some people look at how you live and decide what you can afford. It's easier than actually knowing someone. But we could always do what they do. We could do more than what they do, I said. But that's not the point. The point is that you know the difference between earning something and having something handed to you. You know what you're capable of because you've actually done it. No one can take that away. She looked out the window again. I like the baking, she said. Even when the early batches go wrong. I know you do. Is that why you let me keep running it even though we don't need the income? Smart kid. Yes. Because the money in that jar is not what matters. What matters is that you built something. That you solved problems you didn't know you could solve. That you made a spreadsheet at age 10 because it was the sensible thing to do. She smiled a little at that. We flew home that afternoon. Sophie spent most of the flight rereading Raymond's recipe booklet with one earphone in, pausing occasionally to write something in her notebook. She was methodical about it, cross-referencing notes she'd already taken with new information, building some internal framework I could only partially see. When we landed, I had 26 unread messages. My brother had sent 3, moving from awkward to something approaching genuine. My sister-in-law had sent one, which said simply, "The kids keep asking about the concierge lounge and Sophie's kitchen tour. Maybe we can talk." My mother had sent 6, ranging from confusion to concern to a final one that said, "David told me everything. I didn't know. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have said something sooner." My mother, I responded to. I told her we'd had a wonderful trip and that Sophie wanted to teach her a new cookie recipe the next time we visited. The others I left for later. When we got home that evening, Sophie went directly to the kitchen. She checked her flour supply, her butter, her brown sugar. She pulled up her customer list on the tablet she used for business and typed out a short message to everyone, back from vacation. Taking orders starting Monday. New seasonal items to be announced. It was 8:30 at night. You're planning your return already? I asked from the doorway. She looked up. Mrs. Patterson's been waiting a week. I don't want to leave customers hanging longer than I have to. I watched her restock her dry goods shelf in the order she always kept them, organized by frequency of use, the way she'd always done it without anyone telling her to. She was 11 years old. She paused and turned around. Mom. Was it okay that I showed Uncle my notebook? More than okay. He seemed like he didn't know that's what I was doing. Like he thought it was just drawings or something. A lot of people underestimate you, I said. That's not your problem to fix. She considered this. I wasn't trying to show off or anything. I just thought he might find the layout interesting. I know, sweetheart. She turned back to her shelf. He might have some feedback actually. He does logistics for his company. He'd probably understand the delivery route optimization I'm thinking about. I laughed. I couldn't help it. What? She looked genuinely confused. Nothing. Ask him. I think he'd like that. She nodded and went back to organizing her flour. I made us tea and we sat at the kitchen table while she sketched out her holiday menu on a fresh notebook page. She had 3 new flavor ideas from what she'd eaten on the ship. She had notes from Raymond she wanted to apply. She had customers who'd been waiting. She was not thinking about the cruise lounge, the veranda, the window table at the restaurant or any of it. Those things had been real and wonderful and she'd appreciated every moment of them. But they weren't what she was turning over in her head tonight. She was thinking about the next thing she was going to build. My brother called 2 days later. I answered. He asked how we'd managed the concierge level without him knowing I was doing well financially, and I told him the truth, plainly and without drama: the contract, the sale, the way I'd chosen to keep living because these were our values and not our limitations. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said, I owe Sophie an apology. You do. And you. You do. He said he'd call her. He did, the next afternoon. I don't know exactly what he said, because Sophie took the call in her room. She came out afterward and said, he wants to know if he can pre-order cookies for Thanksgiving. He said the kids told him about the snickerdoodles. Tell him the price is on the website, I said. She grinned. I already sent him the link. She went back to her kitchen. I heard her pull out a tray, heard the soft sound of her arranging things the way she always did, patient and precise, taking her time. Outside, it was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Inside, my daughter was building something one batch at a time. And that, as far as I was concerned, was the whole point.